Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name's Stuart. Let me add my welcome to earlier, and especially if you're online as well. As we come this evening, we come to celebrate, and we come to think a bit more about what's at the center of all of this is about. It's Christmas. I love Christmas. I think many of us love Christmas. I must admit, again, probably like many of us, I do find buying presents a bit stressful at times. I think that's because there is always a hidden message in every gift, isn't there? Every time you give someone something, you're implying something, aren't you? Maybe it's, I think you will like this. Or maybe it is, I think this is your style. Or even worse, I think this is your dress size. You can get these things wrong, can't you? It's a bit dangerous. My parents have bought me a book for Christmas almost every year. They're still buying me a book for Christmas. And every year I think, what's the hidden message? A couple of years ago, they bought me a book on being kind and pastoral. But I'm a professional pastor, A couple of years before that, they bought me a book on making friends. I am coming to the conclusion, my parents think I am the worst vicar ever. Gifts have hidden messages, don't they? So when we hear John, the writer of John's gospel, he says, I've got great news, the great gift at Christmas, light. Light has come into the darkness. The true light that gives life to everyone, it's come. Well, some of us might be like, that's great, Stuart, we love light, but what are you implying? John, what are you trying to say about us? And I think there are many of us who are put off from the Christian message, from the Christmas message, because if we're honest, we don't quite like what it implies about us. We don't like to think about ourselves as being in the dark or needing something. But here's the thing. If you are in darkness, then light is the most life-changing gift, isn't it? It's a life-changing gift. And I think that perceptions are changing. I really think they do. I think there's a lot has happened in a year. I'm reading the newspapers. I'm talking to my friends up and down the country, listening to people coming in through the door here at our church. And I think there's this growing sense that somewhere along the line we have missed something, that we need something. People are hungry. Young people especially are hungry for truth, hungry for real connection, hungry for something lasting, hungry for something to live for. If I were to gather all the sentiment up together, I sort of feel that we're saying as a society at the moment, look, we don't know the answer, but we do know whatever we're doing right now, it isn't getting the job done. It isn't this. So we're hungry. It was a bit of Angelica's story, wasn't it? We heard that on the screens. She was searching for something, but in the absence of true light, that search took her into some really dark places. And maybe you're here today, and if you're honest, you put your hands up and say, yeah, actually, you know what? I can say that's true of my life. Or maybe you look around and you say, yeah, I can see that. I can see that around me. And if that's true, then maybe when John comes and says, good news, the light has come, maybe it really actually is good news for you and for me. So the question is, how does a baby born 2,000 miles away, 2,000 years ago, bring light into my life today? How does a baby make a difference to me today? Well, John goes on to say this. He says, we have seen him. We've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus brings grace and truth into our lives, and that changes everything. Truth. We all need truth, don't we? We live in a world that is drowning in information, drowning in content, and yet there is so often so little truth. The new challenge, of course, is AI and all that brings. AI content, AI videos. It's quite exciting, isn't it? It's powerful. We're going to see what happens over the next few years. But one thing's certainly true is it's definitely getting harder to tell fact from fiction at the moment, isn't it? I was reading an article about how this is really affecting online dating. People increasingly, they're using AI to, maybe to tweak their photos just to look a little bit nicer. That would be nice, wouldn't it? But they're also using AI to craft their whole profiles. I mean, best foot forward, right? Great. But this is the interesting thing. Now, increasingly, people are using AI for the personal messaging bit of dating. Now, after you've been connected with someone, maybe you want to talk with them a bit to work out whether you like the person behind the profile. But here's the thing. When you're online, you literally have 1,000 PhDs worth of interesting facts at your fingertips. You literally have every joke that was ever posted on the internet. You have perfect grammar, perfect spelling. When you finally sit down opposite that person and you finally have to put your phone away, there is no way that you can live up to that persona that you had online. And it's a recipe for disappointment and frustration, isn't it? Truth matters. I think we know this. When you go and buy a car, as I had to last year, I want to know the truth. When I take my child to hospital, I want to know the truth. When I stand at the altar about to commit my life to someone else, I want to know the truth. And I think many of us, most of us, are longing for a truth solid enough to build our lives on. For generations now, though, we've been told you'll find that truth by looking inside yourself. I think that's wearing a bit thin, though, now. I think we're beginning to discover if you look for that truth inside yourself, you will be looking forever, and it will be forever changing. So just what if you could start somewhere completely different? Imagine if you could know the truth about the maker of the universe. Imagine if he turned up tomorrow and you could sit down with him and you could have a cup of tea and you could ask him all your most difficult questions. You could say to him, what's the point of all of this? Does my life have a purpose and a meaning beyond just me? What does it mean to be a human being? What's your plan for this mess? Imagine you could have that conversation. It would be life-changing, wouldn't it? But it does beg the question, if you did want to have that conversation, where would you go? Where would you go to find God? Many people have spent their whole lives philosophizing and guessing what God might be like, but where would you actually go to find him? Dorothy Sayers, she was one of the most successful novelists of her day. She wrote a series of detective fiction stories based on the amateur detective Lord Peter Wimsey. And in her books, Lord Peter, he's very successful, he's very likable, very intelligent, but he's also quite sad and lonely. That is until Sayers' book, Strong Poison, where she introduces a new character by the name of Harriet Vane. After a bit of complication at the beginning, they eventually get together, get to know each other, and eventually they marry, and they live happily ever after. What's interesting, though, is that Harriet Vane is not a pure literary fiction. As many, many people who've read the books have pointed out, as Sayers actually herself admitted, pretty much everything about Harriet is based on her author, on Sayers herself. It seems that at some point Sayers looked into her book. She saw this character, Lord Peter. She saw all the good in him, but she also saw his loneliness and his lostness, and she wrote herself into his story. She wrote herself into his life. That is what the God of the universe has done for you and for me. He has written himself into our story. He has literally written himself into our history out of love for us. That's what John says in our passage. He says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Another translation puts it like this: God became one of us and moved into the neighborhood. Now that has so many amazing implications, but one of them is that we can now know God. John picks this out particularly. A few verses later, he says this: nobody has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is in the closest relationship with the Father, has made him known. Jesus makes God known. Many people say, and some people have said to me, look, I don't think I can believe in Jesus because I don't believe in a God. And I understand that, but I'd say, why don't you come at it the other direction? I would say, I have come to believe there is a God because I have discovered him in Jesus. And if you have never taken the time to read through an account of Jesus' life or really read properly through his teaching, I cannot encourage you more to do that. It won't take you very long, and you will discover that Jesus is extraordinary. He's extraordinary. And many of us here, and I have discovered that not only does Jesus himself make a huge amount of sense, but actually when you put him at the center of your life, he helps make sense of everything else as well. Jesus brings truth that we can build our lives on. But he doesn't just bring truth, he also brings grace. Grace is so important. A few years ago, my wife and I, we went on holiday. It was a lovely holiday, beach holiday. And then to our horror, we discovered on the first night, as we lay down and turned the lights off, hundreds of cockroaches just poured out from every corner of the room. And they were crawling up the walls. And I'm not lying to you, some of them were trying to make it across the ceiling and occasionally drop on you while you were sleeping. And we were in such a quandary for the next few nights, because every night we had this dilemma. If we left all the lights on, it would drive some of the cockroaches away. But here's the thing: you didn't really want to see what was there, and we just felt it was better just leave the lights off and just try and pretend nothing was happening. Try and get some sleep. See, here's the thing: the truth is good. We know that, but it's also scary, isn't it? A truth needs to be softened by grace. The truth is often hard to face, and often the hardest truths to face are those about ourselves. And I think one of the reasons why we are so afraid of the light is because we live in a society with so little grace. And many of us, I think we have this experience. We feel like we're living in a giant Coldplay concert. And at any moment, that searchlight might just pick us out. And suddenly, all will be revealed and everybody will see. And then we'll get canceled, we'll get fired, we might lose someone we love, we'll be publicly vilified. That's the world we live in. And so we live in fear of that. And worse, I think we often project that onto God. We think that's what God is like. Okay, yes, he brings truth, but he's just like a searchlight that if he finds me, he just wants to show me up and shame me. But John says, no, that's not true. Yes, Jesus came to bring truth, but also grace. What is grace? Well, if I give you a very simple version, if someone came and punched you in the face, mercy would be not punching them back, okay? Forgiveness might be reconciling with them, getting back on speaking terms with them. Grace would be buying them an ice cream, wouldn't it? Grace is undeserved favor and blessing on someone. Undeserved favor. I once had a very, very gracious landlady. It was many years ago. I lived with 3 other young guys, and we were nice chaps, but to be honest, we were absolutely clueless, and we ruined that house. And there's one particular incident that sticks in my mind. It was late in the afternoon, and I was cycling back from work. My friend was about a minute ahead of me, and I remember very vividly, I was cycling around the back of the house. We used to live on the first floor, and as I came round, my friend, he was coming down the stairs with this big pot in his hand, and there was just black smoke just billowing out of this pot, and he was just shouting, "Man down, man down, man down." And then he just chucks the pot on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. Anyway, so we rushed upstairs. There was no fire, but it was thick with this black smoke, and it stunk. You have never smelled anything like it. It was like a smell of the burning plastic mixed with burning hair. You know that smell of burning hair? It was just acrid smoke. Anyway, it transpired that my friend, much earlier in the day, on a whim had decided, today I would like to make chicken stock. And he'd never done that before, but he thought it was easy. I'll just stick the chicken carcass in from the night before, a couple of vegetables, bit of water, turn it up to the highest heat, and then left for work. And it was sitting there all that, I kid you. You know what happened? 20 minutes in, it had boiled dry, And then for the following 8 hours, it was slowly turning into something from Stranger Things. It was horrendous. Anyway, we dealt with it, but the smell, it stuck around. Our 4 lads, we lived with every window in the house open in the middle of winter for a full week, and by the end of it, it was still stunk. So I remember us that next week, and we were wiping down every wall, trying to clean this smell out. It was horrendous. And then it got worse. Because then in my wisdom, I said, you know what we've got to do to get rid of this? We've got to wash all the soft furnishings. So I took down all the curtains. I took all the sofa covers, and I put them on a super hot wash. 95 degrees Celsius wash in this thing. And I can still remember my friends' faces when we rehung those curtains. And I kid you not, they were a full foot short of the windows all around the house. And then we tried to put the covers back on the sofa cushions. And where there'd been nice flat cushions, just these balls just there. We had ruined this house. I promise you. Our landlady was so kind. This is mercy, that she didn't chuck us out there and then. Who would have taken the first opportunity to chuck out 4 lads who'd done that to your house? Absolutely. She didn't. She was so kind to us. Next, this is forgiveness. She was still talking to us. In fact, she lived not far, just behind the house, and she was around all the time, trying to help us, trying to clean the house, all kinds of things. She was so kind to us. But there's more. This, you might remember the offending pot. Well, if I'm honest, we just abandoned it. There at the bottom of the stairs, it lay for several months. We just didn't want to go near it. You know, every time it just stunk so badly. And the chicken carcass had literally melted into the bottom of the pan. Plus, it was just a cheap pan. No, we just left it there for months until one day it appeared on our back doorstep, perfectly clean and sparkling. Our landlady, she had taken it away, and I do not know what magic she'd done. I don't know how many hours of her life she'd spent scrubbing it, but she had cleaned it and she returned it. No passive-aggressive note, nothing. She just gave it back to be used. That is grace. You know, I think most of us, when we look around, we can admit there is darkness out there, but also there's darkness in here. And Jesus comes to bring light, but here's the amazing thing. He doesn't just come to show us up. He comes to clean us up. He comes to bring grace and goodness into our lives. Jesus came as one of us so that we could know God. And then he died on the cross instead of us so that he could show us mercy, so we didn't need to be treated as we deserve, so that he could forgive us, so we could be on talking terms again with God. We can have a relationship with God. And so that he could begin to pour out his unmerited favor and grace on our lives. Our God is a good God, and he loves us. Martin Luther King once said, "Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend." And it's true. But actually, Jesus says he came to do something even more amazing. He comes not just to make us his friends, but to make us into his family. Last verse that we'll read from John, chapter 1, verse 12. To all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Isn't that unmerited favor? So as we finish, you might say to me, Stuart, you know, if you tell me that this light came 2,000 years ago, why is there still so much darkness? Why is there still so much mess in my life? And I'd love to sit down for coffee with you and chat that through. But I think at least part of the answer is that, yes, Jesus came 2,000 years ago, but he's alive today, and he comes to each and every one of us. And we have to choose to believe and receive. We have to believe the truth that he reveals about who God is and about who we are in light of that. And we have to receive the grace, the forgiveness, the goodness that he wants to pour out in our lives. And that can be scary. It's scary to walk into the light. But we have to remember this light comes because he loves us and he wants to bring us life. And I promise you, if you say yes, you will never regret it. You will never regret it. Amen.